Welcome to the Dungeon Brew Coffee Tavern, where every cup tells a story, and every story starts with a sip. Join us on a journey of adventure, camaraderie, and of course, the finest brews, served hot and steeped in mystery. From dragons to ancient legends, we're brewing up more than just coffee. Today's tale begins when the crew tumbles through an ancient threshold into a place forgotten by time. Nothing is as it seems. Shadows whisper, doors open without keys, and each traveler must face a piece of themselves in the dark. Now, grab your mug, settle in, and get ready for the next chapter in our brewing saga. Episode 16, Echoes Beyond the Threshold. They tumbled through the broken archway, not into stone or soil, but into something far stranger. The ground did not meet them. There was no bottom, no up or down, only falling. But even that word, falling, felt wrong. They passed not through space, but through memory. Through emotion. Through something that had no shape but knew them deeply. Emotions not their own brushed past them like fog, grief with no face, joy worn like a forgotten coat, sorrow heavy with age and repetition. Some of it tried to settle inside them, but they resisted, or tried to. Fate's voice echoed through the dark, but it wasn't quite hers. It was submerged, bent sideways through the pressure of this place. You must choose, but beware, not all paths. The rest twisted into unintelligible hums, like words caught in a rising tide. Then, without impact, they landed. Softly, as if the void had breathed them out. The stone beneath them was cool and smooth, the corridor narrow and ancient. Glyphs along the walls and floor pulsed with a faint blue glow, like the slow rhythm of a heartbeat. The air was still, but heavy, and shadows clung to the corners like they belonged there. Bradicus was the first to speak, though his voice was quieter than usual, as if even he felt small here.
Well, that was new.
We didn't teleport. We were guided. Something watched.
Patches crouched, touching the ground with careful fingers. Nived gave a low hiss through his nose, adjusting the spice pouch at his side. He glanced toward Java.
I smelled cinnamon, but it wasn't mine. Did you feel it too? Like someone else's memory?
Yes. And not just feel. I saw something. My egg before it cracked. I don't remember ever remembering that.
His eyes fixed on the great stone door ahead of them, and he blinked hard, as if the memory still hovered at the edge of his vision. Fate stood a few steps behind, her silhouette still and unreadable.
This place draws on what's hidden. It doesn't ask permission.
They turned to the door. It towered above them, carved from black stone veined with threads of gold that shimmered like starlight. Symbols twisted and curled across its surface, some of them ancient, others disturbingly familiar. It stood slightly ajar. Java stepped forward, his claw closing tighter around the key hanging from his neck.
It shouldn't be open. I still have the key.
Then something else wanted it open.
Or it heard us coming and decided to let us in.
I'm not sure that's better.
They stood in silence for a long moment, the glyphs on the floor pulsing around their feet like the ticking of a hidden clock. The choice lay before them, framed in stone and shadow. And beyond the door, something waited. Java stood just shy of the threshold, claws curled tight around the key. It pulsed steadily, a low vibration that traveled up his arm and into his chest, not loud, not urgent. Just present. Watching. Waiting. Offering nothing. His wings shifted slightly as he looked from the key to the open door. A tension ran through him, not fear, not exactly, but a question he couldn't name. The others lingered behind him, silent at first. The stone beneath their feet hummed with the same slow rhythm, and the pulsing glyphs along the corridor's edge cast soft light that danced across the walls. Fate stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the towering doorway, her face unreadable.
It's open, Fate. But I didn't use the key. Why? How?
Some doors remember what should not be forgotten.
There was no explanation beyond that. Patches moved toward the nearest wall, one hand brushing across the worn stone. Her eyes narrowed as shapes began to resolve from the surface, No longer just texture or pattern, but images. Hidden until this moment, or hidden until they were meant to see.
Here. Look.
They gathered as she traced the carvings. Dragons curled mid-descent, wings tangled in unseen winds. Cups, some whole, some cracked, one burning from within. A tree, tall and twisted, with bark carved like veins, and in its center, a heart carved in glistening red. The stone bled down the trunk in long, dark streaks. And in the negative space between it all, shadows. Watching. Not quite shaped, but suggestive of claws, feathers, teeth. They seemed to shift when not directly looked at. Nived's scales shivered, a low rumble rising from his throat.
I don't like it. This feels like it knows things about us.
Now, we have a brief break to hear a word from our sponsor.
Welcome, adventurers, to the Dungeon Brew Coffee Tavern, where every cup is a quest and every sip a story. Start your day with the boldness of rogues rolling thunder, Guatemalan beans aged in whiskey barrels, delivering a brew as daring as a rogue's escapade. For those with a sweet tooth, Bard's-inspired hazelnut offers a harmonious fusion of rich hazelnut and decadent chocolate, reminiscent of a bard's sweet serenade. Not a coffee connoisseur? Our artisan teas, like the delicate moonlit jasmine or the comforting cider harvest, promise a journey through flavors both exotic and familiar. Craving something enchanting? Dreamspell chai awaits, blending bold spices into a potion that stirs both body and soul. Join the Dungeon Brew crew and wear your passion proudly with our exclusive gear. Embark on your flavor adventure today at dndinspiration.com. Dungeon Brew Coffee, brewing with initiative, rolling with life.
Maybe it does. Too late to back out now.
No, it's not knowing us that's the problem. It's remembering us before we were ready to be known.
Java's gaze lingered on the bleeding heart. Something inside it called to him, not a voice, but a pull, like gravity.
Is this place showing us who we were? Or what we could be?
Sometimes the line between those is thinner than it appears.
Then, without warning, the door behind them began to move. Stone slid against stone, impossibly silent. The narrow crack vanished, glyphs dimming as the seam sealed itself. And then, it was gone. No door. No archway. No trace of how they'd entered. Only the room before them. Only forward. The corridor began to pulse, not with light, but with presence. As if something vast and unseen stirred beneath the stone, deep and slow. Then the shadows reached for them. Not with claws, but with suggestion, with paths. With possibility. With choice. They didn't even have time to cry out before they were gently pulled apart, one by one. Nived, Trial of Flame. The world around Nived changed with a sudden stillness, as if the very air forgot how to move. He blinked. The others were gone. Where warmth had lingered just moments before, companionship, purpose, even the odd comfort of Java's caffeine-laced chatter, now there was only the cold stretch of a corridor carved from black stone. Slick. Silent. As if light itself was afraid to dwell here. He exhaled instinctively, sending a thin stream of breath across his scaled lips. A spark danced behind his fangs, and he reached for the familiar flicker of flame. But it failed. A pale sputter of light, like a dying firefly, and then nothing.
What in the...
His voice was swallowed by the walls. His claws scraped against the stone as he stepped forward, tail low, eyes glowing faintly with confusion. He tried again, harder this time, rumbling deep in his chest, letting the ember gather at the base of his throat. He willed it forward, willed it to burn. Nothing came. Not heat. Not light. Not power. Just emptiness. The corridor around him began to hum, the black stone shuddering subtly beneath his feet. The walls cracked, just a hair, and memory leaked through. The corridor didn't vanish. It became something else. Ash drifted from a ceiling no longer present. Splintered would lay at odd angles, still smoldering. A cart, familiar, lay overturned, wheels blackened and warped. Shadows of panic hung in the air like ghosts not yet ready to settle. Nived's breath caught in his throat. He knew this place. It wasn't just a battlefield. It was a village. A simple place. They had given him a home once, a curious baby dragon with a love for spice and warmth. He had lived among them, trusted them, and they had trusted him. Until the night his flame got out of control. Until the warmth he brought turned to wildfire. He saw it clearly now, a small child with tear-streaked cheeks, clutching a doll, staring back at him through the haze. Not with fear of the fire, but of him. He had been trying to protect them. That's what he told himself. But flames don't distinguish between enemy and friend. Not always.
Stop. It was an accident. I didn't mean.
His wings twitched, his tail curled tightly around one leg. The shadows listened, then wrapped tighter. Then came the voice. It didn't echo. It invaded. Coiled in his ears, silk-wrapped and suffocating. What will you burn next, little ember? He spun, eyes wide.
Who said that?
There was no answer. Just the rustle of scorched leaves, and the faint crackle of fire that wasn't real. He searched the corridor again, but saw only the shimmer of heatless shadows. The flame he loved, the spark he'd shaped into flavor, into life, it was gone. Or worse, withheld. Was it punishing him? Or was this place simply reminding him of a truth he didn't want to face? That fire, his fire, would never just be warmth. That no matter how careful, how clever, how good his intentions, there would always be the risk of pain. He looked down at his claws, flexed them. In the pale, eerie glow of the hallway, they gleamed like razors.
I'm more than that.
But doubt had already curled into his chest, smoldering low. His eyes burned, not with fire, but with something harder to control. Regret. Responsibility. For the first time, Nived felt the flame not as a birthright, or a gift, or a delight, but as something that demanded choice. Care. Discipline. As a burden. And still, somewhere deep within, the ember pulsed. Not in defiance, but in hope. Patches, trial of healing. A sterile greenish light glowed above her, flickering like a lantern underwater. Cold. Hollow. Too quiet. Patches blinked, heart fluttering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The stone corridor was gone, replaced by a long, narrow infirmary cloaked in silence. Pale beds stretched out in two perfect rows, each one occupied by shadowy forms wrapped in gauze and stillness. There were no windows. No air moved. No breath, except her own. She took a step forward. Her boots made no sound against the floor. Instinct took over. She reached for her satchel, for her herbs, for the vials she always kept tucked beside the binding thread and powdered ginger root. But her bag was missing. Her belt was bare. Even the familiar hum of her healing magic, soft as breath in her bones, had gone quiet. A chill crept along her spine, like a forgotten memory resurfacing in the dark.
Hello? Is someone?
A figure on one of the nearest beds turned its head toward her. The face was blurred, indistinct, like looking through misted glass, but somehow, heartbreakingly familiar. Her breath caught in her throat. So many faces blurred together here. The child with the infection that came too fast. The old man who asked her to sing as he passed. The soldier whose wounds had already spoken his fate, even as he begged her not to leave. They were all here. Lying still. Waiting. Watching. Patches took a trembling step backward.
I tried. You know I did. I tried.
But they didn't answer. Not until one did. At the far end of the room, a figure sat upright. Slowly. Stiffly. Like a candle remembering how to flicker. Its features were half-glowing, ethereal and fragile. One hand lifted, pale, trembling, fingers outstretched toward her. Its voice was like gauze torn from a wound. Would you give part of yourself to bring another peace? Patches didn't move. Couldn't. Her heart stuttered. The question wasn't just a question. It was a choice. And she knew, not in logic, but in the marrow of her being, what it meant. Not metaphor. Not magic. The real cost. To take in another's pain and carry it as your own. To hold someone's final breath in your lungs, knowing it would never leave. To give a spark of your soul so that another might rest. Or rise. Patches swallowed hard, her throat dry. Her hands clenched and unclenched. She could almost feel the phantom weight of that exchange, something she'd offered before and might again. She looked down at her fingers, then at her chest, where her heart fluttered like the pulse of a spell mid-casting.
I already have. And I will again.
The words weren't loud, but they were true. And that truth echoed through the infirmary like the last note of a lullaby. The figure smiled faintly, just enough for her to feel it, and lay back down, dissolving into light. For one brief moment, warmth pulsed through the room. The green glow softened, became golden, almost comforting. Then it faded. The beds were empty. The room gone. But something lingered in her chest. Not pain. Not grief. A thread of stillness. Of purpose. And the silent vow that whatever she had left to give, she would offer again, if it meant someone else might find peace. Bradicus, Trial of Purpose. The air was thick with heat, the sun burning low and blood red on the horizon. The ground beneath Bradicus's boots crunched with brittle ash and shattered iron. Dust coiled in lazy spirals, heavy with the scent of sweat, scorched leather, and old, rusting blood. He stood in a field of ruin. No map named this place, but his soul did. Spears lay broken like bones in a mass grave. Shields were half buried in the dirt, their paint dulled, their crests slashed and forgotten. The cries of battle echoed, not fresh, but remembered, like the dying rhythm of a war drum still beating in his chest. All around him, younger soldiers flickered through the smoke, phantoms in half-formed armor, faces that blurred the longer he looked. They called his name, shouted for orders, desperation twisting their voices. But he couldn't answer. He never had. Because this battle had already been lost. Not in the fight, but in the choosing. The kind of stand no commander survived. The kind where you led from the front, knowing no one would follow you home. He turned slowly, the weight of the air pressing against his armor, his memories. And then he saw him. Himself. Younger. Leaner. Armor gleaming with the pride of cause. No scars yet carved into his jaw. No hesitation in his step. A sword at his side that had yet to taste regret. The younger Bradicus looked into the eyes of his older self and spoke.
You know it's hopeless. Just walk away. Live.
It was a temptation, not a command. To leave. To survive. To put down the sword and take up something easier, something safer. But another voice came, low and slow like stone cracking under pressure. Even lost causes shape who we are. Bradicus turned toward it, but saw no speaker, only a banner, half buried in the dirt. Torn. Faded. But still bearing the emblem he had once painted himself. The mark of a stand he had made with his own hands, for people who couldn't fight for themselves. He stepped forward. Every inch of his body remembered the aches, the fear, the bitter edge of knowing he couldn't save them all. But still, he had stayed. His eyes fixed on the broken banner.
I didn't stay because I thought we'd win. I stayed because someone had to.
The wind shifted, soft now, no longer choked with the stench of war. The battlefield trembled, and then faded, as if exhaling. The younger version of himself held his gaze one last time. There was no accusation in those eyes now, just understanding. And maybe, in the deepest shadows, respect. Then he vanished, like smoke on a breeze. Bradicus stood alone in a field gone quiet. But in his chest, his heart still beat steady. Heavy. Purposeful. Some burdens, he realized, didn't have to be victories to be worth carrying. Java, Trial of Identity. Java's claws clicked softly against the smooth, cold surface of the floor, each step reverberating in the stillness. The air around him felt thick, dense, as if every breath was filled with the weight of unsaid things. The stone beneath his feet had vanished, replaced by something far more unnatural. Polished obsidian stretched endlessly before him, the surface so smooth it reflected his every movement, like 1,000 eyes watching in silence. To his right, the reflection of a version of himself stood behind a counter. A cafe counter. His smile was wide, easy, a barista in his element. The familiar warmth of the coffee shop, the sound of brewing pots, the crackle of conversation. But in this reflection, he was more than a coffee dragon. He was a keeper of warmth, the creator of comfort. On his left, another version of himself sat by a window, a stack of books piled at his side. His tail curled lazily around a book of ancient lore, and a monocle perched on his eye, magnifying the curiosity behind his gaze. The world outside seemed vast, full of knowledge, full of adventure. In this reflection, he was a scholar, a seeker, a wanderer in a world of stories and wisdom. Ahead, the mirror shimmered. In it, he saw himself small, so small, a dragon nestled into a ceramic cup, steam swirling around him like a tiny cloud. Comforting, peaceful. He could almost feel the warmth of the cup against his scales, the softness of the steam, the quiet of a moment that needed no explanation. Java paused in the center of the hall, the reflections circling around him like ghosts. Each shimmered, flickered, and shifted. Versions of himself, choices he hadn't yet made. Some of them were wild dreams, others, paths he didn't even know existed. The shopkeeper, the scholar, the quiet little dragon in his cup. His reflection shifted again, and this time, it wasn't just a face, it was him, standing outside himself. A version of Java taller, older, wiser. His eyes glowed faintly, a soft, ethereal blue, like something ancient pulsing beneath his scales. The dragon in the mirror smiled, not with the warmth of the shopkeeper, but with the calm assurance of someone who had seen far beyond his own limits, and he spoke.
You carry the key.
Java's claws tightened around the key in his hand, feeling its hum deep within his bones. It had been with him since the moment they'd found the ancient archway, and yet, he still didn't understand what it truly was. The reflection spoke once more.
But do you know what you are unlocking within yourself?
Java froze. The key, warm and solid in his hand, suddenly felt heavy, a weight he hadn't expected. He stared at his reflection, the version of himself that understood, that had unlocked something deeper within. His breath caught. What was he really unlocking? His purpose? His potential? The path he should walk? Before he could answer, the reflection dissolved into darkness, fading like mist in the sun. But in the space it left, something else began to bloom, slowly, like a seed sprouting in the dark. A small glowing bean hovered before him. It pulsed gently, alive with energy, like the heartbeat of the world itself. And beneath it, spreading out like an infinite horizon, was a crossroads, a tangle of 4 paths, winding and twisting in every direction. But there were no signs. No markers. No indication of which path to take, which direction to go. Only the hum of possibility, sharp and electric, buzzing in the air like static. Java reached forward, his claws trembling slightly as they hovered over the key, the only constant in the shifting chaos of reflections and crossroads. It was still warm, still humming with that same unknown potential. Still waiting. But for the first time, Java wondered if he truly understood what it was unlocking. Was it a path of comfort? Of knowledge? Of safety? Or was it a path he wasn't yet ready to walk, a version of himself that would only emerge when the time was right? He held his breath, watching the crossroads in front of him, feeling the weight of that question settle in his chest. For the first time, he realized the answer wasn't in the key. It was in the choice. When they rejoined, silently, wordlessly, something had changed. In each of their eyes flickered an echo of what they had seen. The air between them hummed with the weight of unspoken revelations, but none of them spoke. Not yet. Fate, standing apart from the group, seemed different. Her eyes were dark pools, reflecting something far beyond this place. She did not meet their gazes. Instead, her hand rested lightly on the curve of her staff, fingers brushing the symbols etched into its length as if feeling for something unseen. The faintest of smiles played at the corners of her mouth, but it was not one of reassurance. There was a stillness about her, an aura of quiet knowing. She had walked the trials of this place before, or perhaps had always known them. Yet when she spoke, her voice was only a whisper.
Some paths are only seen when we choose to walk away from them.
Her words clung to the air, heavy with mystery, but they didn't feel like a warning. It was more like a riddle she had already solved, one they had yet to even begin to understand. And then, as if the rest of the world had faded away, she looked directly at Java, her gaze penetrating.
Beware the ones who wait for you to return. Some doors do not open from the inside.
A chill ran through the group, the cryptic weight of her words settling into their bones. Ahead, the corridor narrowed again. And something just beyond it breathed. To be continued. The fire is low, the mugs are empty, and tonight's tale has come to an end. But the journey is far from over. Thank you for gathering with us at Dungeon Brew Coffee Tavern, where adventure brews with every sip. Join us next time as new challenges arise, mysteries deepen, and the magic of the tavern unfolds. If you enjoyed this taste of adventure, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a new episode. We'll save a seat for you at the tavern. See you soon.